What began as routine late-night banter spiraled into television chaos when Stranger Things star David Harbour confronted Jimmy Kimmel over inappropriate comments about his personal life, triggering an explosive on-air meltdown that left audiences stunned. Kimmel strutted onto the stage with his trademark smirk, feeding off the energy of his loyal studio audience. The comedian had built his career on pushing boundaries, often at the expense of his guests. But tonight felt different. Behind the scenes, whispers circulated about Kimmel's increasingly erratic behavior during pre-interviews. Staff members noticed his questions growing more personal and invasive, straying far from the agreed-upon topics. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the man who made us all afraid of the upside down. David Harbour, Kimmel announced with exaggerated enthusiasm. The audience erupted as Harbour walked out, waving politely, his demeanor professional, yet slightly guarded. Something in Kimmel's tone seemed off, carrying an undertone that made seasoned crew members exchange concerned glances. The interview began innocuously enough. Harbour discussed his latest project, shared amusing behind-the-scenes stories, and engaged in the expected back-and-forth banter. The audience laughed at the right moments, and everything appeared normal. Kimmel seemed on his best behavior, sticking to pre-approved questions about Harbour's career and upcoming projects. As the conversation progressed, however, Kimmel's questions began to shift. What started as innocent inquiries about Harbour's work gradually moved into more personal territory. The host's tone grew sharper, his smile taking on a predatory edge that made Harbour visibly uncomfortable. Camera operators zoomed in, sensing the tension building between the two men. "So, it's David," Kimmel said, leaning forward with that familiar gleam in his eye. "I have to ask about your recent divorce. Everyone's been talking about it. The tabloids are having a field day." The studio fell silent. This wasn't part of the agreed-upon discussion, and Harbour's publicist could be seen frantically gesturing from the wings. Harbour's jaw tightened, his media-trained smile faltering for a moment. "Jimmy, I prefer to keep the focus on my work tonight," he replied diplomatically, trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground. But Kimmel wasn't finished. Sensing blood in the water, his instincts kicked into overdrive. "Come on, David, don't be shy. Your ex-wife had some pretty interesting things to say about your anger issues. Care to comment?" he pressed, his voice dripping with false concern. The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud, and the audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Harbour's hands clenched into fists on his lap, his knuckles whitening as he struggled to maintain composure. The cameras captured every micro-expression, every sign of his growing agitation. "That's not something I'm going to discuss here. Jimmy, let's talk about the show," he said firmly, his voice carrying a warning that Kimmel either didn't hear or chose to ignore. Relentless, Kimmel pushed on. "I mean, the police reports are public, record domestic disturbance calls, property damage. That doesn't sound like the David Harbour America knows and loves." The words cut through the studio like a knife. The tension became palpable, and even the usually supportive audience sat in stunned silence. The color drained from Harbour's face, replaced by a flush of barely contained rage. This wasn't journalism. It was character assassination disguised as entertainment. Harbour's breathing grew shallow as he processed the magnitude of the betrayal. Every boundary established beforehand was being trampled for the sake of ratings. "You know what, Jimmy?" he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, his eyes locked onto the host. "I came here in good faith to promote my work, not to be ambushed with lies and personal attacks." The studio fell deathly quiet, broken only by the hum of cameras capturing every second. Kimmel, realizing he may have gone too far but unwilling to back down, doubled down. "Look, David, I'm just asking the questions America wants answered. If you can't handle a little scrutiny, maybe you shouldn't be in Hollywood." Kimmel sneered, his voice taking on a mocking tone that sent shockwaves through the studio. The audience, unsure how to react, began to murmur uncomfortably. This wasn't the light-hearted entertainment they expected. Harbour's body language shifted completely. The composed actor who had walked onto the stage was gone, replaced by a man pushed beyond his breaking point. "Scrutiny," he repeated, his voice rising dangerously. "You call spreading unsubstantiated gossip and attacking my character scrutiny. This is exactly what's wrong with this industry." Behind the cameras, the host's producer frantically signaled, slicing a hand across his throat, pleading for Kimmel to stop. But the damage was already done, and Kimmel seemed intoxicated by the chaos he had unleashed. "Oh, come on. Don't play the victim now," Kimmel scoffed. "You Hollywood types are all the same. You want fame and fortune, but you cry when people ask tough questions." "Tough questions," Harbour shot back as he stood abruptly, his chair scraping across the studio floor with a harsh screech that echoed through the sudden silence. "You're not a journalist, Jimmy. You're a gossip-mongering parasite who feeds on other people's pain for entertainment." The words struck Kimmel like physical blows, and for the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. The audience sat frozen, witnessing something entirely unscripted, raw, real, and deeply uncomfortable. Phones appeared throughout the crowd as people began recording, sensing they were watching television history unfold. Kimmel's face flushed red, his ego wounded by the public dressing down. "Hey, I'm just doing my job," he snapped. "If you can't handle the heat, maybe you should stick to playing pretend monsters instead of acting like one in real life." The insult landed like a hammer. The studio gasped. Harbour's hands trembled with barely contained fury. "My personal life, my family, my struggles, they are not content for your pathetic excuse of a show. You want to know about monsters, Jimmy? Look in the mirror." His voice carried such venom that even the camera operators instinctively stepped back. The tension was suffocating. Kimmel's band sat motionless, unsure whether to play or flee. The host's confidence crumbled as he finally grasped the seriousness of the moment. "Look, maybe we should take a commercial break," Kimmel stammered. "No," Harbour cut in sharply. "You wanted to air my dirty laundry on national television? Let's talk about yours. Your history of inappropriate comments about female guests, your behind-the-scenes behavior your network covers up, or your own marital problems your publicists work overtime to hide." The color drained from Kimmel's face as Harbour turned the tables. He had done his homework, and now it was his turn to strike. "You sit here night after night, tearing down people with real talent because you're a failed comedian who peaked making prank calls 20 years ago." Security guards appeared at the edges of the stage, uncertain but ready. The studio felt like a powder keg. Kimmel's mouth opened and closed, his usual quick wit abandoning him. "What? Got your tongue, Jimmy?" Harbour sneered, stepping closer to the desk. "Not so funny when you're the punchline, is it?" Harbour's imposing frame cast a shadow over the shrinking host. The audience sat in stunned silence, phones recording every second of Kimmel's public humiliation. This was no longer entertainment. It was a public execution broadcast to millions. As the host's carefully crafted persona collapsed, revealing the insecure bully beneath the late-night facade. "You know what the saddest part is?" Harbour continued, his voice steady and filled with disgust. "You could have been decent. Sku, you could have used your platform to lift people up, to create something meaningful. Instead, you chose to be a bottom feeder, profiting off other people's misery while hiding behind a fake smile and scripted jokes." Kimmel finally found his voice, though it came out as a desperate croak. "David, please, let's just calm down." But Harbour cut him off with a sharp gesture, his patience completely exhausted. "Don't you dare tell me to calm down. You opened this door, Jimmy. You want to play games with people's lives? Let's play." Harbour reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone, holding it up for the cameras to see. "I've got recordings, Jimmy, conversations with other celebrities about your behavior. Want me to play them for your audience?" The threat hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Kimmel's eyes widened in panic as he grasped the full scope of his predicament. Network executives were likely already fielding angry calls from sponsors. And now, guests were turning against him with evidence of misconduct. "You can't do that," Kimmel whispered. "Those are private conversations." The desperation in his voice was unmistakable, and even his most loyal audience members began to see him differently. Harbour laughed bitterly. "Private? Like my divorce proceedings were supposed to be private. Like my personal struggles were supposed to be off limits. You don't get it both ways, you hypocrite." Each word landed with surgical precision. The studio atmosphere turned toxic, thick with tension and barely restrained violence. Kimmel's band exchanged nervous glances, some quietly packing up their instruments in case they needed to leave quickly. The once vibrant talk show set now felt like a courtroom passing judgment. Harbour turned to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is what passes for entertainment in Hollywood. Washed-up comedian who gets his kicks from attacking people who can't defend themselves." "Well, Jimmy, you picked the wrong target tonight." Kimmel's producer rushed onto the stage, frantically whispering in the host's ear, but Harbour continued. "You want to know why your ratings are dropping? Why your show is becoming irrelevant? It's because people are tired of your cruelty masquerading as comedy. They're tired of watching you tear down people who are actually making a difference in the world." Kimmel tried to regain control, standing on shaky legs. "Look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot. Why don't we start over?" His voice wavered with false bravado, and no one was convinced. Harbour shook his head in disgust. "There's no starting over from this, Jimmy. You showed your true colors tonight, and millions of people saw it. You're not a comedian. You're a bully with a microphone and a captive audience. The only difference between you and a schoolyard bully is that you get paid for it." Security moved closer as the moment reached its peak. Kimmel's hands trembled as he gripped the edge of his desk, knuckles white. The carefully controlled world of late-night television had collapsed into chaos. "You know what the real tragedy is here?" Harbour said, his voice cutting through the silence. "Your audience deserves better. They tune in expecting entertainment and laughter, maybe a glimpse into their favorite celebrities' lives. Instead, you feed them toxicity disguised as humor. You've poisoned late-night television with your narcissistic need to feel superior." Harbour stepped back from the desk, straightening as he prepared his final words. Cameras captured every second as millions watched in stunned silence. "I've worked with incredible host people who understood their job was to elevate their guests, not tear them down for cheap laughs. Johnny Carson knew that. David Letterman, for all his flaws, respected his guests. But you," he gestured dismissively, "at Kimmel, you're a cautionary tale of what happens when mediocrity is handed a platform." Kimmel attempted one last desperate counterattack. "You can't talk to me like this. This is my show," Kimmel protested, but his voice cracked on the final word, exposing the fear and humiliation beneath his bravado. The audience, once loyal, now watched their hosts melt down with a mix of embarrassment and fascination. "Your show." Harbour laughed coldly. "Look around, Jimmy. Your audience is recording your breakdown. Your staff is avoiding eye contact. Your security team is ready to escort me out. But they're probably wondering whether they should be protecting me from you or protecting you from yourself. This isn't your show anymore. It's your reckoning." Harbour pulled out his phone and deliberately deleted something on the screen, making sure Kimmel saw it. "Those recordings I mentioned. I was bluffing. But here's the beautiful part. I didn't need them. You destroyed yourself tonight, live on television, in front of millions of witnesses. You've done more damage to your reputation in 20 minutes than I ever could have with hours of leaked audio." Kimmel's face went ashen as the realization hit. He had been completely outmaneuvered, driven into ruining himself on air. The evidence of defeat was written plainly across his features. This is what happens when you mistake cruelty for comedy. Harbour continued, addressing both Kimmel and the audience. when you build a career on punching down instead of lifting people up, when you forget that behind every celebrity is a human being with feelings, struggles, and dignity. The studio fell silent except for the hum of cameras and the nervous shuffling of crew members. Even security stopped advancing, sensing the confrontation had shifted into something deeper. Harbour straightened his jacket and looked directly into the main camera. To everyone watching at home, you deserve better. You deserve hosts who celebrate talent, ask thoughtful questions, and understand their role is to connect artists with audiences, not humiliate people for ratings. He turned back to Kimmel one last time. Jimmy, I genuinely hope you get the help you need. This behavior, the need to tear others down to build yourself up, isn't healthy, and it certainly isn't entertaining. Maybe use this moment to reflect on who you want to be as a person, not just as a performer. Without another word, Harbour walked toward the stage exit. The audience remained silent as he passed, his dignity intact amid the chaos left behind. No one applauded. No one jeered. They simply watched Dot at the stage door. Harbour paused and looked back. Oh, and Jimmy's next time you try to ambush someone with personal attacks, make sure they don't have more dirt on you than you have on them. In Hollywood, everyone has secrets. Not everyone is foolish enough to broadcast their own destruction on live television. With that final blow, David Harbour exited the stage, leaving behind a broken host, a stunned audience. In a moment destined to be replayed across social media, the confrontation ended not with violence or intervention, but with the complete intellectual and moral victory of a man who refused to be victimized. Kimmel sat alone at his desk, the weight of his actions settling over him as his career unraveled in real time before a national audience.